A campaign of shock and awe has begun. This startling message tonight being beamed into households at the front line of a growing COVID emergency.
It is a graphic and confronting ad that is very much about the specific circumstances in Sydney right now.
A COVID-19
Elsewhere, the rest of the country's being called to bear arms in Australia's pandemic fight.
Now's the time to arm yourself, your family, your friends.
Every day, a precedent is set for the elimination of individuals and their freedoms, which is becoming more open, formal, and inclusive, involving all denominational hierarchies. We're talking about the exclusion of those who refuse to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. One of the most serious cases we see in a Western country right now is in Austria. As of February 2022, Austria is forcing its entire adult population to be vaccinated, and all refusers face fines of 3,600 euros, followed by a fine of 7,200 euros and/or 2 months in prison. Germany has just passed an occupational vaccination requirement for nurses' homes and clinics. How long will it be before it will affect the entire German population? Because according to our new Secretary of Health, Karl Lauterbach, fines for the unvaccinated are already unavoidable. By 2022, the Great Reset will begin. Some speak of a purge. Freedom-loving people will go to jail for state and church-sponsored vaccination commitments. This is wrong in many ways. Regardless of where you stand on vaccines, we all need to speak out against this oppressive vaccine compulsion that will put people in jail and destroy families. But instead, religious organizations have allied with the state to promote the ideology of the beast from the biblical book of Revelation, quoting Pope Francis, who said that vaccination is an act of love to promote the common good. Thanks are to be given to God in all of this. He is said to have been the one who gave us these vaccinations. And who can still oppose such a conviction if God leads us here apparently by pressure, force, illogic, fear, agitation and so on? Then I tell you, I personally ask myself which God I have served the last few years. Doesn't 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 say, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind"? If this is not a forerunner of the mark of the beast, where church and state work together to violate freedom of conscience, then please tell me what it is supposed to be. For true Christian love and morality are dedicated to the protection of human life and freedom. Real human beings are denigrated and punished by these forced vaccinations. This is a violation of humanity and basic human rights. Religions claim to preach love, but their vision of love is one that, as a part of the Great Reset, welcomes oppression and persecution. It is amazing how the modern church has become so blind as to trade the biblical love of God for something that justifies its members being sentenced to fines and imprisonment without saying anything. Many believers join the common opinion that there's just no other way and that these punishments are necessary even if it affects their own brothers and sisters in faith. Masks and social distance were the first steps, followed by COVID-19 vaccinations and passports. Now, anyone who does not get vaccinated is to be fined and imprisoned. Where will the road to tyranny and totalitarianism lead if churches do not speak out against these abuses now? Will unvaccinated parents lose custody of their children as a result, or lose their homes as the new Austrian laws already give the possibility to? Does anyone still dare to claim that this madness will come to an end? We are already seeing that for the good of all unvaccinated people are being labeled as lepers. They are shunned as if carrying potential death and are deported to concentration camps, as we have seen in Australia.
Australia. Until recently, that country was most famous for its sunshine and relaxed attitude. Well, since the COVID pandemic hit, we've all got to know another side of Australia, with some of the longest and most stringent lockdowns and travel restrictions in the world. It's become a case study of what happens when a government will do anything to keep COVID numbers low. Their latest policy is to build special camps, COVID internment camps, to which infected and suspected infected people are moved. The biggest of these camps is called Howard Springs. It houses up to 2,000 inmates, surrounded by tall fences and carefully policed against attempts to escape. It's been described as the gold standard of such camps and is being replicated across Australia. Joining us today on the line from Darwin in the Northern Territories is Hayley Hodgson. She has just returned from a 14-day, let's say, stay at Howard Springs. So Howard Springs is the biggest COVID camp in Australia, isn't it? It's a huge network of cabins that is built to house potentially infected people.
Yeah, so they are literally bringing in now hundreds of people that are of close contact or that have COVID. So it doesn't even matter if you test negative on your first test, your second or your third. They need to, because you're a close contact, you have to stay in there for 14 days, no matter what. So
these two policemen, what is the choice they give you exactly? It's come with us in this van, or you get a $5,000 fine.
Yeah, and I later on I was negative. The whole time I was there, I was negative. And I said, once these go negative, am I allowed to leave? And she said, no, you're here for the 14 days. We can, but we're only allowed to stay in our designated areas, which is nothing, maybe 2 meters. We have a deck that we're allowed to go out and maybe get a little bit of sunlight, but that is it. If you get caught off your decking without a mask on or anything, you get a $5,000 fine.
Where it makes no sense or it doesn't seem right to you, that is the line, and that's what the law is there, and that's how it goes, yeah?
So during that whole time, how many times were you tested, and did you ever test positive?
Never tested positive at all, and I was tested 3 times.
So at the moment, you haven't had COVID?
Never had COVID, and I was of close contact to someone, never got it, and I was treated literally like a criminal.
What's happened to you since you came out?
I no longer have a job, as I was casual at where I was working, so I am now unemployed.
There's been a lot of press in Australian media about how these camps are really luxurious and it's like having a holiday. Did it feel like a holiday for you?
No way. You are literally trapped in a box on your decking with fences all around you, cameras everywhere. Like it's just astounding. Like you're literally treated like a prisoner in there.
What is happening, do you think, to Australia and to your country?
Well, it's so hard. It's like people aren't, we just abide by the rules and we're just going with the flow, but this flow doesn't seem to be getting any better. Like, we have hardly any numbers and they're doing this to us still. It's just crazy. But the unvaccinated people who choose not to be are just looked at like prisoners and that they're doing the wrong thing.
At any stage of this process, did anyone tell you your rights? Have you had any contact with a lawyer? Has there been any kind of legal process?
Nothing. I've had nothing. Yeah, literally, it's so hard. No one really wants, nobody knows. That's the thing. So it's like you're on your own in these situations, and you're just left. That's all. Like, there's no help when you're in this camp, and there's no help when you're out of this camp. Your mental health, it's just, as I said, like, you're in a box, your mind's just going a million miles an hour, you feel horrible, it's just horrible what they're putting people through, because you feel like you've done something wrong when you haven't. All you were doing is going about your normal life, and you were close contact with someone who was ill. That's all it is.
Where are the churches now, showing compassion for their members and defending the rights of the unvaccinated? Tragically, most church leaders do not care about these souls. Sure, they accept their love offerings and monetary donations, but don't seem to care what happens to them. Religious freedom leaders of many churches defend these vaccination enforcement mechanisms and clearly state that they are not a violation of religious freedom, and no one can invoke religious liberty as an excuse to deny the vaccination. Well, what about the famous speeches about the human dignity of every human being of our religious leaders? Are the unvaccinated not human beings? Do they not also have basic human rights? Are we okay personally with the lives of our members and their families being ruined by heavy fines and imprisonment? Or are we only concerned with their wallets, their tithe, and not their souls? Or are we so entrenched in the ecumenical movement that we howl with the wolves at the same time? I mean, Paul clearly warned about wolves in sheep's clothing in the church of God. And this is not the first time that the so-called believers have been on the wrong side of history. And I say this to their eternal shame. Most Christians have largely ignored the evils of slavery. And the majority of Christians in Germany and Europe have been silent on the atrocities of the Nazis. The Third Reich showed us how, through propaganda by church and state, people can be made synchronized emotionally. Sadly, most Christians today, including some of my own brothers and sisters in the faith, turn a blind eye to the deliberate, wholesale persecution of the unvaccinated. And don't they today put the anti-Semitism card in the shoes of those who don't know any other way to defend themselves and protest peacefully? And many Christians believe the modern propaganda machinery and once again join in. Then, as today, one simply continues. Then, as now, one could have known it long ago. Not only the Catholic Church, but also the Protestant Church collaborated with the Nazis. And they even actively participated in National Socialism. When they took the oath to the Führer, very few theology professors refused to raise their hands. They even opened the church books to the Nazis and thus helped to extradite baptized Jews. Finally, the church excluded non-Aryan people from its fellowship. Traditional anti-Judaism easily joined Nazi racial anti-Semitism. And when the Nazis began to remove people from their society, the German people became complicit by their silence. This was especially true of church leaders. One of them was Pastor Martin Niemöller. He is the author of the poem First They Came, which illustrates the silence and cowardice of the German people, including his own. Here, is Martin Niemöller's own confession. First, they came for the communists, and I didn't fight back because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't resist because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't say anything because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and at that point there was no one left to speak up. There's nothing new under the sun. History teaches us that this comparison is not too sharp because we see more and more what kind of spirit is revealed in society.
Habt ihr Angst, dass die nächste und übernächste Woche noch mehr Leute hier sind? Und dann macht es wie in Holland, schießt dann auf die Leute oder was? Könnt ihr abends noch im Spiegel gucken?
Das habt ihr selber versaut.
Ich kann das.
Dass ihr andere Leute töten?
Ich töte andere Leute.
Genau. Indirekt schon, genau so sieht es aus. Dass ihr andere Leute töten.
Ich töte andere Leute.
Indirekt schon, genau so sieht es aus.
Ich töte andere Leute.
Genau so ist es. Sie sind indirekt Mörder, weil sie hier andere Leute anstecken, wissentlich. Sie sind indirekt Mörder, weil sie hier andere Leute anstecken, wissentlich. Sie stecken indirekt nicht so nah ran. So, wie sie jetzt hier gerade zu mir rankommen. Ungeimpft, wie sie sind. Stell ich Ihnen einmal, deswegen...
Naja, unterstelle ich ihn. Naja, unterstelle ich ihn.
Ja, genau.
Das macht das schon seit 1,5 Jahren. Und die ganzen Bundesbürger unterstellt ihr, das sind alles Mörder.
Habe ich recht oder habe ich nicht recht?
Womit?
Na, ist es so oder ist es nicht so?
Was, weil ich ein Mörder bin und du ein Spinner?
Sind Sie geimpft oder sind Sie nicht geimpft? Ja. Na was denn? Sind Sie geimpft oder nicht? Also habe ich recht oder habe ich nicht recht? Sie sind geimpft.
Bin ich ein Mörder oder bin ich keiner? Bin ich ein Mörder oder bin ich keiner?
Sie haben jegliche Menschlichkeit verloren. Sie haben jegliche Menschlichkeit verloren. Jegliche Menschlichkeit
Ich habe alle Menschlichkeit verloren. Was bin ich denn?
Das weiß ich auch Gott.
Wenn willst du mich erschießen, dann zieh deine...
Das weiß ich auch Gott.
Wenn willst du mich erschießen, dann zieh deine Knarre und erschießt mir doch kein Mensch. Bin ich ein Tier oder was? Nein, ich möchte jetzt in die Maßnahme und dann können wir über eine Anzeige reden. Du sprichst mir die Menschlichkeit ab. Du sprichst mir die Menschlichkeit ab.
Mach ich.
Da bist du nicht ganz dicht in deinem
Die
Schädel.
Menschlichkeit ab, weil es genau das, wissen Sie, was Menschlichkeit ausmacht?
Was denn? Dass du mich Mörder nennst, dass du hingehst, dass du hingehst. Nein, kann ich nicht mehr. Und die Menschlichkeit abschließt. Was bin ich denn? Im Prinzip.
Ja, das ich auf jeden Fall kennenlernen. Ja, das ich auf jeden Fall kennenlernen.
If we remain neutral while unvaccinated men, women and children are harassed and their lives and property are threatened, we are part of the problem. Then we can talk about a pandemic of silence or the silence of the lambs. Isaiah chapter 59 verse 3 says, "For your hands are defiled with blood, and your fingers with iniquity. Your lips have spoken lies. Your tongue hath muttered perverseness." Our brothers and sisters in the faith are under attack, and the rest of the body of Christ has a responsibility to stand up for them and support them. If we do not, we will soon find ourselves among the persecuted. It's only a matter of time. But unfortunately, I believe personally that our religious leaders will ignore this particular problem until it creeps up and catches themselves from behind. If they don't speak up now, it's only a matter of time before the lions come for you. His watchmen are blind. They are all ignorant. They are all dumb dogs. They cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber. We are complicit in the current crisis if we remain silent when unvaccinated men, women and children are harassed and their lives and property are at risk. Our Christian brothers and sisters are being persecuted, and the rest of the church has the responsibility to stand up for them and support them. Again, if we don't, we will be among the persecuted very soon. It is only a matter of time before that happens. Because if the wolf comes, the danger is imminent, and the wolf manages to separate the sheep, the wolf will succeed. But if the sheep do not allow themselves to be distracted, press together, knowing that they serve an almighty shepherd whom they can trust, the wolf will seek its own and take flight. God, beloved, calls every Christian, indeed every Seventh-day Adventist, whether in a leadership position or as a regular church member, to the responsibility of breaking the silence of the lambs. And if you want to learn now more about the great conflict between good and evil, where this spirit is heading, get a copy of the eye-opening book, The Great Controversy, and find answers, hope, and the solution, namely the way and the truth and the life, the biblical Jesus. May God bless you. Maranatha.